Every patient story is a call to action for researchers to turn pain into progress. Hear how science and humanity join forces against long COVID, coming up on The Long Haul with Summer. Welcome to the next episode of The Long Haul with Summer, where we're talking about real stories, real solutions, and innovative paths to care. And we're challenging the traditional healthcare system. We're so excited today about all the many collaborations that we have, but we're going to talk especially with one of our close collaborations who has been working on some research projects with us. And we're going to welcome in Mr. Mendel Fishman. And thank you for coming down here today and talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
We're so excited to hear about all the great things that you have going on. So could we start first by you sharing a little bit about your background and what led you to working with long COVID and this area?
Of course. So my journey to being involved in this work is, you'd probably say, quite circuitous. I was living in Brooklyn, New York in 2020, and I was actually, I think, in my last year of college then, and I got an acute infection. I was in excellent health, very fit, very active, had a very long schedule that I didn't find challenging, and I wasn't able to shake symptoms from that acute infection. And especially because it was very early on in COVID, in the COVID, what's now the epidemic, when I tried having those symptoms addressed by my primary care provider, by specialists, they didn't even know that long COVID was a thing.
Right.
And they certainly didn't know how to diagnose it. So it took me more than a year, and between out-of-pocket expenses and insurance, more than $10,000 to get a diagnosis. And that made me realize that there has to be a better way. And so since then, I've been focusing on really trying to build the system that allows for the faster, cheaper, better diagnosis of long COVID. And the goal is not just to allow patients to avoid all the complexities and costs of a very lengthy diagnostic process, but eventually also to give physicians tools to better care for patients. And we aren't creating therapeutics, but the way we see it is that diagnostics is the crucial step that's needed to get patients diagnosed and patients treated properly. So that's what we're working on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your story, your personal testimony. You know, it's interesting because I've spoken with a lot of people on this podcast who their journey personally of long COVID is what got them into their work. I've spoken with teammates of ours and even myself who, you know, this path chose me kind of, certainly not one that I would choose. But because you have been down that road, you want to do something different as a clinician and as a, you know, researcher and a teammate. So thank you for sharing that. So can you tell me a little bit about your company? What are the missions and goals of your company?
So we focus on lab tests, and we hope to create lab tests that can help diagnose long COVID and also hopefully help clinicians decide the best treatment approach for their patients with long COVID. And we're looking to create a model that also works well eventually for other conditions like ME/CFS, POTS, etc., which are similar, not just in terms of their symptomology, their clinical presentation, but there's also a lot of similarities in the business challenges to developing and commercializing lab tests. And so we hope to build the expertise and the infrastructure once for long COVID, which at least from a commercial standpoint is the obvious place to start, just because of how many people have recently gotten long COVID, how many people will probably get long COVID, and certainly how many people have it and haven't yet been properly diagnosed. So this is where we're starting, and hopefully we do good work in the long COVID space and also apply the same model to other conditions.
Great. So that's very fascinating. We certainly need all of those things. As a clinician, we're always looking for, ways to fast track getting these people help. And diagnostics is a huge part of that. I have patients ask me all the time, how are you going to test me for long COVID? And that's a hard question to answer, because we're sort of ruling out everything else, right? And checking other things. And we're looking at clotting profiles and all the things, but we certainly need a more, rapid way to identify these people and if they're going to have difficulty and, the other things. So I think that's amazing. Can you share with us a little bit about how your work and collaboration begin with the foundation and your work with Dr. Vaughn? So how is it that we, work together in that aspect?
Yeah, of course. So, I think it was in 2023 where that's when I became quite serious about taking this idea of developing and commercializing diagnostic tests and turning that into a business that would raise money and would hire and contract people to do this work and then eventually validate it. And that's when I got in touch with Dr. Vaughn, because I saw that he was one of the physicians who were much more involved in the long COVID space and was open to working with different people, looking at new ideas. And he didn't necessarily have a schema that was very rigid, which is always refreshing to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the amazing characteristics of Dr. Vaughn is he is very open to collaborations, both, internationally, nationally, and, certainly anyone who's willing to think outside the box to collaborate with him and alongside his team. I know he certainly welcomes that, and we're grateful for that. Kind of talking about some of the work you've done so far, what do you think the biggest challenges are in the work that you're doing right now?
So without going into the specifics of the assays we're working on, the partners we're working with, so, and this isn't just specific to people who are in the startup for-profit space, a lot of researchers are also going to face the same challenges, which I think that's getting people who would potentially fund projects. So if you're a researcher, usually that's someone like the NIH, or if you're in our position, that's usually private investors, getting them to understand that long COVID is real, that it's a distinct entity, and that it's not going away. And so it really makes sense to invest in that today.
Right.
That's a big challenge. Of course, regardless of whether you're a researcher or you're in the startup space, the field, there's still many scientific unknowns, and the science is developing. I would say it's obviously developing slower than I'd hope for. It's not developing very quickly, but there's still a lot of unknowns, and when you're in a environment where things are shifting around sometimes it's hard to invest, especially if into for-profit entities, because what's the field going to be like in a year? Maybe we'll have a silver bullet drug for, and I know that for patients, these possibilities are very sound great, even if they are, as at least based on what we know, less likely. But if you're pitching to investors, these are things that they're concerned about. Another thing is just the learning curve of starting a startup. And then on top of that, it being a biotech startup. My background isn't a science background. So I've had to learn a lot. And I'm still learning a lot. But thankfully, with the right team, the right advisors, at least some of the science doesn't have to be taken care of by me, thankfully.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just running a business, and because we're a startup, raising money at the same time, it's it'll keep you busy.
I bet. I know you always have a million things going on. And I know we've gotten to work together, and have some ongoing projects. One thing I've learned in doing research and projects that, we've been collaborating on is that this stuff takes time. I am kind of a checkbox person, and I like to make a list at the beginning of the day, and I like for it to be done. And unfortunately, that's not the way this works. So how is it that you stay motivated when things take time, and when patients are waiting for answers and they're ready for us to get those answers? What keeps you motivated?
Well, two things. Firstly, if it was very easy, then I don't know if it would be worth doing, at least not as a startup. So it can't be easy for us. That said, we've been working on this for a long time. There's certainly been days where things have not worked out. There've been experiments that, the first one's gone great, the second run's gone great, the third run, it's just not working and we don't know why. Or even worse, the first run's bad, the second run's bad, the third run's also bad. But at the end of the day, two things. Firstly, there's my own personal story. Like I know how much people's health means to them. And if we have a shot at improving that, then that's certainly worth it. And it's not just me or some of the friends I know who have gotten to know over the last few years, or in some cases, even people who I know very well before 2020 who later got sick. There's millions of people with this condition. And I know it's like sort of a cliche of fighting for the millions of nameless, faceless people out there, but they're not nameless and faceless. They all have their own lives, which they want to get back to.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're there for. We're looking to make material changes to their health, their lifestyle, their ability to get back and do what they're doing. And I'm sure that if we can get something into the clinical workflow, and I know that's like a very cut and dry way of thinking of it, but if we could just get something into clinics, to physicians, that is measurably helping patients, then it'll just be, it'll be unbelievable for,
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. I think that's also what keeps me motivated. I mean, I think it's important for people to know, like, I am a patient. I have a daughter who also is a patient. So part of me is motivated every day to make her better and keep us healthy and figure that out. And then the patients that I see, certainly, I mean, it is motivating when they do get better, in part by what our team is doing, and these ideas that we're collaborating on. So to formalize those, I think, and to share them, it is definitely motivating. Although it is very tedious, it is very slow, and as you know, in the private sector, we have a lot of constraints. Finances being a major part of that, because most of funding goes to large institutions and things. So I mean, there's certainly barriers, but I feel like the more we're open to collaboration and, being down in the trenches like you are, that has been helpful, I think, for our team and for our collaboration. So we appreciate you collaborating with us doing that. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about developing diagnostics. So you're talking about assays and things that you're doing and developing diagnostics. So can you, and you kind of alluded to this, the importance of it, but tell us about the potential roles of developing these lab tests and assays that you're working on. So we know the importance is to get these people identified and get them to care, but what role do you see that playing in their care and treatment plan?
So broadly, the tests that we're developing, we see them as having two roles. The first one is used within the diagnostic process. Mm-hmm. So at least in the case of long COVID, currently, long COVID is diagnosed through a process of exclusion. Mm-hmm. So patient presents to a primary care provider. I mean, you should be the one explaining how this works. So I'll let you do that.
Yeah. So, and I've talked to other experts on the team and stuff. I mean, there is no test for long COVID, right? And patients ask me all the time, what are you going to test me for? And the answer to that is everything, right? We have to it is a diagnosis of exclusion. It's a very clinical diagnosis. So we basically check everything and make inferences based off what is negative, what is positive. So there are other things besides long COVID, obviously, that make people sick. And so we have to throw the net really, really broad, which makes it very, very complex. I mean, we're talking about tubes and tubes of blood, many diagnostics. It's very complicated to try to hammer down and narrow down exactly what's going on with the patient. And it is a diagnosis of exclusion. And a lot of times, as you said in your personal testimony, it's after tens of thousands of dollars you've spent, copays, meds, supplements, and you've gone to all these people, traveled across the country, perhaps, paying flights and all that to get to where you think, a center that can help you. So they're at the point of, no return. They've gone everywhere else. And it is, a clinical, diagnosis of exclusion, as you said. So how do you think these lab tests that you're developing can help us in that and expedite getting those answers for patients?
So the way this would work is initially it would be a data point that would be taken into account in that process. And that would be supported by a clinical validation that we do. So we take, for example, people who have successfully recovered from COVID. And we compare that to, or we take the samples from these people and we compare it to the samples of people who have long COVID. And we try to understand how this test allows us to, without taking into account all the confounding clinical histories and details surrounding the patients, or in this case, the subjects of the study, we try to understand how well this lab test alone can separate out these two groups. And then we can give clinicians an indication of how to interpret our test in the diagnosis of long COVID. And then eventually what you'd want to see as well is that we're not just looking to see if a biomarker is elevated in long COVID, we're also looking to see that it's not elevated in some of the conditions that present to clinicians like long COVID. Because once you can do that, then you can give the clinician a lot better ability to rely on the results of that test.
Right.
And so that's really the diagnostic. That's why having a test that can help with the diagnostic process is so important. One other thing is that often everything we've said about lab tests giving patients and clinicians the ability to accelerate through the diagnostic process is true. There's also two other things. The first is that you get to avoid cases where patients are being diagnosed with something else when they really have long COVID. And often these patients will go on they'll go on to be treated for that condition which they don't have. And sometimes the treatment will have no effect. And the patient is, coming into a clinic for some type of procedure, or they're taking some type of expensive medication months on end, and, they're seeing no positive impact from these treatments. In some cases, actually, these treatments have side effects, and they haven't even been tested for safety in people with long COVID. So, and this is something I experienced myself, where I was receiving a treatment for a condition I didn't have, and I was having side effects which may have been even worse than a patient typically experienced, because I had long COVID.
Right.
So I could have avoided that entire experience and the costs associated with it with avoiding avoiding that misdiagnosis. The other possibility is that you'll have patients that don't have long COVID, who are being diagnosed with long COVID when they actually have either quite a treatable but perhaps more rare condition, which is why the physician hasn't screened for it, or they have potentially a life-threatening condition such as lung cancer that has a lot of the shared symptoms of long COVID. And so by giving clinicians a tool to avoid all these problems, we're really going to save a lot. We're really going to improve the outcome for patients with and without long COVID in many different ways.
No, I think that's an amazing explanation. Thank you for sharing that. That'd be great. It's like the golden ticket, I would love to screen these people a lot quicker and easier, but I'm also as a clinician fearful I'm going to miss something else. Because we see these people every day. They're coming to us, yes, for long COVID, but that doesn't mean that's necessarily what it is, or that's all that it is, or what else has COVID done that it's turned on genes in their body for an autoimmune disorder or a cancer, heaven forbid. So I think that will be very helpful in guiding not only my own practice, but other people as well. And you're talking about these tests, and, I know there's a lot of work that goes into it, and we talk. You said you don't have a clinical background. I do, but I don't have a research background. So it's very important for us to put those two pieces of the puzzle together. But once you get to that point, and you have the proof and you have the data, how does a test then get commercialized? What do you do from there?
Of course. So to commercialize a test, you have to it depends on where you are, which country you are, and actually within the US itself, it actually depends which state you are in some cases.
Of course.
So the regulatory environment that we operate in is it's moderately complex, I'd say. It's not like, thankfully, we're not creating a nuclear reactor, but we're also not selling people widgets.
Right.
Because there needs to be more work done on around the test's accuracy, its implications, before we get to commercialize that.
Right.
And so generally you could think of what's needed to commercialize a test as it needs to be valid in two different ways: analytical validity and then clinical validity. So analytical validity is that if you say that you're testing for biomarker X, that your test actually accurately either detects that, or in the case that it's a quantitative test, it measures that accurately. And that's irrespective of how it's being used clinically. Now, the second thing that people should be doing is they should be ensuring that there's clinical validity to the test. So in the case of a biomarker being used to diagnose a condition, let's say you're just looking to diagnose the cold, you want to make sure that, let's say if you're doing that via PCR, that that whatever marker you've chosen correlates closely enough with somebody being infected with a cold. So that's what's needed for commercialization. The standards for getting that covered by insurance are a little bit higher, and that requires you not just to show that there's some correlation between what you're testing for and for the condition, but that by using this test, you in some way improve an outcome for the patient. So that could be in the reduction in cost because they aren't getting all these other tests, or that could be because, for example, in the case of long COVID, they're being diagnosed, that they have access to better care, better treatment, and they don't have a clinician, let's say, who thinks that they have just seasonal allergies and is trying to test, or they're trying to treat them for that specifically. So
that's, that's a long process. And it sounds like you have to be very strategic, check all the boxes that they have you check. And then sounds like sometimes, you mentioned before, going back to the drawing board, which is the frustrating part, I think, of research and validating things and then, getting things out to the public because, if it's not valid and if it's not, doing what you want it to do, then it's not helpful for the patient. But that can be a very tedious process, as I'm learning as well. Are there any upcoming trials or specific projects or partnerships that you want to highlight or talk about, that in particular?
Yeah, of course. So we have, so in the coming months, we hope to start collecting samples for our clinical validation. And we're going through the final stages of getting that all finalized. Probably by the time this podcast is released, we'll at least have all the details locked in place. And then sometime after that, we'll start recruiting participants. So we're very excited about that. We've done smaller collections, but nothing as extensive as what we have planned. And we hope that through this, we're going to power not just the tests that we're most focused on getting to commercialization now, but also in the future, we'll be able to just use the samples that we've already collected to understand how other biomarkers can potentially be used as tests in people with long COVID, and some other conditions as well. And then also look at how those test results correlate with the tests, with the test results from the very first tests that we're going to use on this cohort of participants. So, like I said, we're focused both on bringing specific tests to market and also building the engine to really just accelerate that process of finding a biomarker or having a hypothesis about a certain biomarker in, let's say, long COVID, to commercializing that as a test. So instead of having that process be 5 or 10 years, we want that to be under a year. And so all of the machinery that we're building around validating and commercializing our first assays, we want to keep that and really use that to power just consistent innovation and development in the future.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's so close.
Yes, yeah. So both validation is very close, and also we're working quite intensely right now on getting our clinical license and bringing our first test to market. And we hope to announce that in the next few months.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yes.
I know we're excited. And speaking of which, how do you think, I mean, with your research and the things, I know you collaborate and read and you're contacting people all over the country all the time talking about all the things. How do you think that, or what do you see is the evolution of our research on long COVID over the next couple of years?
It's hard to say, because perhaps I think hopefully that will be determined by what we find in the next year. That the policy and investment into long COVID research is being influenced by the findings as they come out. Hopefully we find some, or we continue to improve on the evidence of some treatments, at least helping patients symptomatically, not being curative, but at least helping patients manage their symptoms and live more normal lives. We find biomarkers, which are very important, not just for treatment, but also for research, because without good biomarkers, often conducting robust clinical trials on therapeutics is much more challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And I just hope that people invest more money into long COVID research, both the government doing that, and nonprofit organizations, and also investors, private investors as well. I think that it's a good thing if both categories of entities doing research in this area are well funded, because you need both. You need the nonprofit entities who focus on more broad questions, and you also need the startups that are focused on more narrow areas and are nimble and agile and can really move things that are closer to commercialization to the finish line quickly.
Yeah, and I think that your company's mission aligns perfectly, with Dr. Vaughn's and the foundations, because in many ways it's a grassroots effort, right? I mean, you've got a startup company and you're tiny but mighty, and I think that's kind of how he started too. And we're trying to collaborate and use the resources that we have that others can share with us as well. It's really hard, as you know, in the private sector to kind of align all those things. But we're grateful for people who are nimble and who are, also doing the same things from the trenches and understand those things, personally. And speaking of which, has being a part of this work changed you personally or professionally?
Yeah. So, well, it's absolutely changed me in many ways. I think it would be easier to explain professionally how it's changed me. I think that hopefully I've gotten a little bit more competent over the last 2 years or so, having to run a startup and raise money, hire people, and really understand how to have a team work well together. Hopefully it's made me also think more long term, as you have to in this space, because you can't just think of a product or think of an idea one day and then test it the next and bring it to market on the third. So yeah, it's certainly taught me patience, hopefully, or at least some patience. I wouldn't call myself patient yet, but and personally, I'm sure that many people who have had long COVID have experienced this, where especially people who are young and who hadn't previously thought much about their health, but absolutely, like, health really is what makes everything else possible. And hopefully, when I do get better, I don't take that for granted. And I know that that's easier said than done, because it just having that health just I mean, when you have it, you don't think about it. We all know, but yeah, that's, and I would say also one more thing is, and probably many people who have long COVID or similar conditions will say the same, but there's at least I found that you get to a point where you have to accept that you have this illness that isn't well understood, and that you have to accept that at some point, and understand that this isn't a limitation that you're responsible for, but it is a limitation that if you want to go about it in the smartest way, perhaps you could say in the wisest way, you have to just at a certain level make peace with and live within those limitations. And that realization doesn't make you a weak person. It makes you a smart person. And so, like, you can be hard on yourself, but like it's not like at a certain level, it's not your responsibility. So yeah, just be patient, be smart, and hopefully what all these different people, many of whom I know are working on, produces the results that they intend for, and we get better care, better management, and hopefully a cure eventually for all these conditions. No easy task.
No, no.
But
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And one thing you said really hit home with me, and I was thinking, and I saw this quote after being sick myself, that a healthy person has a million wishes, but an unhealthy person only has one. And that is so true. And I feel that, personally, but also now professionally, I see that with my patients. I mean, they just want to feel better. They just want their health back, whatever that looks like, to restore, them to that. And it is humbling to be able to be on that journey with them, and hopefully give them, some of that. But it is a harsh reality when you're well and then you're not. And I think that certainly is motivation for us to keep, pushing forward to figure out these things for ourselves and for other people. What is the one thing that you wish that every listener, whether it's a patient, a provider, a policymaker, understood about this work? Is there just one thing?
So to patients, I think if I could go back to something that I would say what we just went over, like, I can't tell you how to think. I certainly can't tell you how to feel. But personally, a lot changed for the better when I realized that when I accepted some of the limitations of long COVID, and I also realized that that wasn't a character flaw, and so that helped. If you're a provider, hang on. We're in the next few months, we're going to be commercializing some tests, and this also goes to other researchers. We'd love to work with you. If you're a researcher working on clinical trials and you're thinking of putting something together in the next few months, get in touch. Maybe we can use our tests as an exploratory endpoint. If you're a diagnostics innovator, get in touch with us, and we'd love to see if we can use some of the infrastructure, both research and clinical, to help you get from biomarker discovery to commercialization quickly. And lastly, if you're a policymaker, we should be investing a lot more into long COVID research. And the reason for that is the amount of money that long COVID and some of the connected conditions are costing at least in the case of the US, in the context of this conversation, the amount that it's costing the US economy is immense. And just think about all the people who are not working because of long COVID, or people who are working part-time or even full-time, but they don't have that sharpness because of their condition. The costs to that are immense, possibly tens, if not $100, $200 billion a year. That's not over exaggeration if you just look at the amount of people who have long COVID and you think about the productivity that's lost. Now, that may be convincing to people who are trained economists. So if you're a policymaker who's not a trained economist, then I'd say just think about those 10 or 20 million people with these conditions, many of them who you probably know, and they may not be telling you about their condition, their symptoms, because generally people don't tell people about illnesses that, in the case of long COVID, is still, at least in some circles, somewhat stigmatized. I mean, there's no test for it, so people always question the validity of the condition. That's something we're looking to work on ourselves. But you know these people. Like, if you know more than 50 or 100 people, which if you're a policymaker, I'm sure you do,
Yes.
You know these people. And think about the vivaciousness that they'd have if they were able to get back to their selves before these conditions started. All the productivity and the goodness that they'd bring to the people around them. And so I think, I hope that makes a compelling argument that long COVID deserves just so much more investment and so much more careful thought and urgency than we've seen. And I know that policymakers are moving in the right direction, but this is urgent. You know, we need more investment and better governance of that investment immediately.
No, I completely agree with you. And I often say, I think back, I mean, this all started in 2020 and it is the end of 2025. And what are we doing? We still haven't really made that many strides. I mean, certainly within our team, I think we have grown and learned and done things, you know, to move forward. But as a country, we're behind. Even if you look at the data and research that's being produced outside of our country, they're way ahead of us. And which is why we use a lot of, you know, international collaboration and data. But I do think the conversations that I have heard recently in the last several months involving policymakers has been really encouraging. So perhaps we are moving in the right direction.
Yes. Hopefully.
You mentioned that if anyone is, you know, thinking about, you know, collaborating or starting to do something and wants to collaborate, you know, to reach out, what would be the best way for them to get in touch with you and your team?
Email.
Okay.
Yeah, old school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And could you share that email?
Yeah, sure. It's info@celestiadiagnostics.com.
Perfect.
And we don't yet have active social media, but soon we'll be on what's called now X. And we may be on, I mean, we're on LinkedIn if that's your thing, and we may be on Blue Sky if that's where people get their news and social from. We just want to reach people where they are. So we're not active yet because we're still preclinical, but once we're closer to that time, we'll start engaging more on these platforms.
That's amazing. So one more thing for me to follow and for all of the listeners to follow, they can hopefully see what you're doing and see the collaborations that we're doing with the foundation. Gosh, I can't thank you enough for coming and talking to me about all of these things today. It's very exciting to get to work with your company through the foundation and just hear all the great, amazing things you're doing for patient care. And we're very excited. Congratulations on all the work you've done so far. And I can't wait to hear about when things get released and hopefully put those into our own practice, and continue to work with you to move forward. So I just thank you for coming and talking to us today and sharing with all the listeners, hopefully, some great insight for some things that are forthcoming. Well, you guys have heard from Mendel today, who is being innovative in development of new assays and tests that will change, hopefully, the outcome and the way that we diagnose and treat long COVID patients. And for many other conditions, I think this can be applied. And I have enjoyed having this very insightful conversation. Hopefully, we've all learned about how you can get involved personally as in research, and just, as a patient or as an advocate. So thank you again for listening, and hopefully we have given you some data that you can share knowledge going forward. And thank you for tuning in for this episode of The Long Haul with Summer.